What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Paranormies present the Ahnenerbe Hour. I am Johnny Monoxide, and tonight we have a very special program for you. I am joined by a panel of guests. We have Mr. Dark Enlightenment. How's it going, dude?
Going great, Johnny. Thank you for having me back.
Hey, no problem. From the Northwest Imperative, which is no longer, it's on hiatus, we'll just say. And from the pause button, we have Mr. Borzoi. What's happening?
As TRS's resident social, I'm glad to finally make my appearance. Hello, John.
Right. Hello. From the Godcast, we have Mr. Myles Poland.
Always a pleasure to be furthering the cause of the rampant incest on the TRS radio network.
And for his first appearance on the show, the one and only from the Traditionalist Workers' Party, Mr. Matt Heimbach.
It's a real pleasure to be here, guys. First time, many time listener, first time caller. So pretty excited to be here with you guys tonight.
Awesome, man! It's great to have all you guys on here. This is like an all-star cast. This is tonight on a very special Paranormies. We're gonna get right into it.
Dissident right, Dirty Dozen here.
Hell yeah, Borther. We've got a very special topic. We've got a very interesting thing going on tonight. We are going to be talking about church. What do you guys know about church?
That you should go to it.
That's right.
Yes, go the fuck to church.
You should go to the right church, though.
This is true. This is true.
Don't go to
don't go to faggot church and stay the fuck out of a synagogue. But we'll tell you why. So let's you guys all bring a different area of expertise and specialty on this subject. What we're really going to be talking about is the subversion of the church by a certain group of subversives that everybody here at TRS seems to know about.
The Swedes.
Those goddamn Swedes and the Anglos. It's the Swedes and the Anglos. It's all their fault. No, we're going to talk about, as Dr. Kevin McDonald says, let's talk about Jews.
Let's talk about Jews and me. Let's talk
That's
about
right.
all of the good things and the bad things.
So,
I don't think I can come up with a good thing, but yeah. Who wants to get started? Who wants to start?
Can I just make a quick introduction here, Johnny?
Sure.
So for those of you who don't know, out there in Radio Land, we're actually all friends. Like, Johnny has my actual IRL phone number, and we call each other on the phone to just say, "Hey, brother, how you doing? Merry Christmas," things like that. And about a month ago, I called Johnny and I was like, "Johnny, everything is run by pedophile, communist, Satanist Jews, including church." And Johnny was like, "Well, of course it is. Why?" Imagine my shock. And I said, "I just found this book, and it's called The Subversion of the what the fuck is it called?
The Plot Against the Church.
The Plot Against the Church by Maurice Penier, and it's all about how the Jews tried to destroy the Catholic Church." And I knew about like the Jewish attempt to destroy the Eastern Church through communism and stuff, but I was like, oh my gosh! In this book, my Jimmies are like somewhere in orbit around Jupiter right now. But Johnny was like, "We'll talk about it." And then things got busy with the holidays and everything, and so we're finally sitting down to do this. And it's not just the Catholic Church that they tried to destroy, but they've also tried to destroy the Evangelical Church, and Poland's going to talk about that. And they've tried to destroy the Orthodox Church multiple ways. And Borzoi and Matt are both going to be able to talk about that. And since Matt knows all about all this stuff, he's going to talk about both the Catholic and Orthodox churches. But I went from being a guy who was like, "Oh, hey, Orthodox Jews are good. They're just like me. They're religious. They're pro-life. They believe in God," to being like, "No, they all have to go. They all have to leave." And so we're gonna kind of talk about how this whole, like, it's not just your imagination that church sucks and it's full of communists and Jews.
No.
And there's a reason why.
Yes, sir.
It's the
There's
kind of
a
thing
reason.
that's so obvious once you... Sorry, go ahead, Johnny.
Oh, I was gonna say it's so obvious. I have always, everybody knows my story about, how I grew up not liking Jews, because they're just shitty people. I didn't know this about the church. Having been in the evangelical side, like I have I have a brother who's a Baptist, fundamentalist Baptist preacher. I have uncles and aunts who are missionaries, cousins who are missionaries. My mom's whole side of the family there is all evangelical Christians. From They've been to Pillsbury Bible College. I forgot the other one, Liberty, and Bob Jones is another big one. I went to Bob Jones Academy. My mother graduated from Bob Jones University. So like I've been around, and the more we got into this after, you know, Dark Enlightenment there was getting me into, you know, this research in this, to see the subversion of the evangelical church, and it explains so much about why the church is the way it is now. So, sorry, Myles, go ahead, bud.
Well, I think I was just going to repeat what you just said.
Oh,
but it's something that's so obvious. Once the case is laid out, it's so clear and it clicks so firmly with what you've seen and what you've observed. But you sound crazy trying to convey it.
right, because Jews don't want anything to do with Christian church. Jews don't want anything to do with with Orthodox church. Jews go to synagogue. I mean, why would they have nothing to do with your church? That's separate religions. What is wrong with you? We love the Jews because they're God's chosen people. But other than that, like, I don't know why you're saying this to me.
Yeah, this is the original. This is the 1.0 version of, well, how does it affect your marriage?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the entire thing with this, I think, is really important for us to be able to understand that what most people, like in the alt-right and the nationalist scene, think of Christianity is because of their own personal experiences. And it's primarily a totally different experience from what all of our ancestors experienced with what Christianity actually was. Like Charles Martel or like a Wehrmacht soldier or the defenders of Vienna were not talking about Jews being God's chosen people. They were not talking about turn the other cheek in a way that then you let your daughter get raped by immigrant, rape gangs and things like that. The idea of the nation was common sense. I mean, the idea that the nation is a people with a distinct culture, language, tradition, this goes back throughout all of Christian history. You see it throughout the Bible. So the idea that, one of the most important things for people to understand that might be skeptical of Christianity is we're talking about like legitimately two separate things. We've got American Christianity of really the post-World War II period. I mean, you had the Southern Baptist Convention, the Low Church Protestants being invoked, that in the 1950s were opposed to interracial marriage. Now they're saying that they support tearing down Confederate monuments, and none of their members should fly Confederate battle flags to honor Confederate soldiers. This is a church that literally was founded on wanting to own black people. Right, like, and we're not arguing like right or wrong or anything like that, but the idea that like the Northern Baptists and the Southern Baptists separated from one another over the issue of slavery, and now they're saying you can't even have a Confederate flag because it might offend blacks. That we're talking about the subversion that the Jews have done on our institutions. To be against Christianity is almost to say like we need to be against Germans because of Angela Merkel. Like Angela Merkel is not representative of German culture, the German people, and German history. This is bizarro clown world. And that's what we all live in right now when it comes to all of our institutions have been hijacked. So I think it's just important for us, as we're getting into this, is if you're listening and you're skeptical, you say, I grew up in church. You probably weren't growing up in what even your grandparents experienced in church and what our people have practiced for almost 2,000 years.
On the show recently, Mike Enoch said something that was very telling. He said, it's up to you Christians to make Christianity something worth participating in. Now, that's true. We do have to take back our churches by hook or by crook, by any means necessary, I think. But it reveals the assumption that the truth is not sufficient for belief for a lot of the people in the alt-right. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people where they'll say, I don't care if Christianity is true or false. I care whether or not it's good for my people. And that's a very telling attitude, I think. It's deeply unfortunate.
Well, it's like that with a lot of things, not just this church thing, but like with, since we're here on the Paranormies, conspiracies in general. It falls into that same thing where people they have a hard time doing what we call in the military pushing the I believe button. They've been raised on this whatever you want to call it, neutralized Christianity, Judaized Christianity, that they can't believe the actual truth. I was talking to my mom about this because my mom's a Reaganite, conservative Christian, voted for Trump, but definitely one of those Reaganite Republicans. And everything about my mom is, God's chosen people. Can't talk bad about the Jews. She actually posted a Hanukkah thing on her Facebook, and I tried to explain to her. I was like, Mom, but on Martin Luther, was it just recently? Was it his birthday or the anniversary of Martin Luther's doing something recently?
The 500 years since the
500 years
since the yep.
Yes, that was in there, and she was posting all this Martin Luther stuff. And I was like, so Mom, who also didn't like Jews? And I showed her Martin Luther's book, and I got a little bit of there's this cognitive dissonance there that it's just ingrained in these people. They just don't get it, because they've been trained to love this tribe of Chosenites, above their own people.
What's interesting about Luther, right, is that I'm not a particular fan as a trad Catholic of Martin Luther, but he reached out in good faith to the Jews and was like, okay, I'm trying to understand this scripture thing, and y'all know Hebrew, and so help me out here with this Old Testament thing, and I want you to have Jesus because I want you to go to heaven. I don't want you to go to hell and stuff. So I scratch your back, you scratch mine. We're going to try and honestly engage with each other. And he tried for years to just honestly engage with these rabbis in central Germany. And he finally just got fed up and wrote this book on the Jews and their lies. I mean, gradually I grew to hate them. I wonder, there was another German guy who came to that same conclusion.
You wrote a little book about that, his struggle or something like that.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites about this chair. It's this really comfy chair that he was sitting all the time, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, and this is right. Okay, first of all, the Jews of the Old Testament, all the Jews became Catholic or became Christian.
Orthodox.
Right? Yes.
Okay. Matt,
what's going on here, Light?
Okay, but you and I will have that discussion when you come visit me, dude. But we can have, Matt and I could have 3 beers and argue about this all night. But they became Christian. St. Peter became a Christian. St. Paul became a Christian. All the apostles started out Jews and became Christians. A significant chunk of the Jewish community became Christian because it was the truth. And the people who didn't accept Christianity literally get cursed by God in the scriptures to become, the children of Satan. Jesus Christ himself, God himself says, these are the children of Satan. But Talmudism is younger than Christianity. These people, they want to claim that they're 5,000 years old. They're not. Everyone who actually follows the true law of Moses is a Christian today. And so, they want to claim all this other stuff that they don't have title to. And they constantly try to destroy Christianity.
Well, I mean, one of the most important things for us to remember is going back to the Bible, and all the translations that come out, in modern day are really pushing a specific agenda. But you just have to look at, one of my favorite verses, John 7:1. If you read the King James, it says, "After these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he would not walk in Jewry, because the Jews sought to kill him." And this helps us understand an important thing, that the only apostle that was actually from Jerusalem and from that area was Judas, who is the epitome of what a Jew is, a sniveling, traitorous coward that puts money above everything. Even when he's seen the truth, he does what benefits himself financially. But the idea of the apostles and of Christ being obviously clearly separate, I mean, this is a scriptural thing. And, mentioning Martin Luther, I think it's important. I cracked open my copy of On the Jews and Their Lies, which I actually have by my computer. And there's just one verse I think is really, really good for us to remember that, if you're a Protestant, if you're a Catholic, if you're Orthodox, the way our about Jews is so important, because experience with them, realizing what they do, allows us to really know how to deal with them. And Martin Luther wrote about this: first, to set fire to schools, and to bury and cover with dirt whatever will not burn, so that no man will ever again see a stone or cinder of them. This is to be done in honor of our Lord and of Christendom, so that God might see that we are Christians and do not condone or knowingly tolerate such public lying, cursing, and blaspheming of his Son and of the Christians. For whatever we tolerated in the past unknowingly, and myself was unaware of it, will be pardoned by God. But now that we are informed, we're to protect and shield such a house for the Jews, existing right before our very nose, in which they lie, blaspheme, curse, vilify, and defame Christ and us. It would be the same as if we were doing this, and even worse, upon ourselves. So, like, that's like Martin Luther didn't know about the Jews, got woke on the Jews, and this going back to Scripture and throughout all of Christian tradition is once you realize what the Jews are really up to. I mean, like the French king that got the Talmud translated for him, and then he ordered it to be rounded up and to be burned because it was such blasphemous material. Give you one face in public. They say a different thing in their synagogues or in their meeting halls, their merchant clubs. I mean, they absolutely are. Throughout all of our history, the last 2,000 years, opposition to Jews is really a religious duty. And even when Jews aren't religious, it's a religious and racial duty of theirs to try and destroy us. Because as Hilar Belloc said, Europe is the church and the church is Europe. So Christendom, even if you're like a secular white, or if you're a pagan or atheist, that like the Christmas tree you put up so that your kids have a fun tradition, the Jews hate that because that's, that Christianity is tied to the European people. Their hatred of us is both religious and racial, and we can see this over the last 2,000 years.
The relationship fundamentally between the Jew and the goy is one of a sociopathic abuser and their victim. Taking a look at the Google machine, I actually pulled this up. This is my topic of research. I guess I got the memos a little bit wrong. I was actually doing a little bit of homework on homosexuals in the church. Not that there's a whole lot of daylight between Jews and homosexuals and their behavior, but let's see. What do sociopathic abusers do to their victims to try to get them to come back? Let's see. They refuse responsibility. Oh, it wasn't us, goy. No, it was the Egyptians. They attacked you, you nice little boat there. They lie, self-explanatory. They look down on you. Sounds about right. They're two-faced, exactly what Matt just said. They're vindictive. Hoo boy! If you've ever met a non-vindictive Jew, you've met a unicorn. They project psychologically. And they smear people who oppose them. Now, these are all the traits of pathological narcissists, and it fits the Jews to a friggin' T.
Well, yeah. Of course, that is a perfect description of them. I was saying to Borzoi and Dark Enlightenment earlier, I've never met such a more egotistical, narcissistic, and yet sniveling group of people all at the same time. And Matt, you're thinking of King Louis IX of France, who did that was the trial of the Talmud in 1240.
Yep, exactly. No, the name escaped me. I apologize.
No. It's hey, don't worry. But that's I had to look it up. You didn't. It's not like I knew.
Well,
it
okay. So not only is Saint, he's a saint.
Yes,
Johnny.
that is Saint
Louis.
Louis. Yes, that is Saint Louis.
Right.
Yes,
Saint Louis IX. And so, anybody who like I bring up the whole like Christianity is older than Judaism thing because Jews don't actually worship God. They worship their own buttholes. I mean, literally, they do.
Well, no, they literally do. We talked about this. This will be the third show that I've talked about this in the last week. They worship themselves. That's the story of the rabbi who argued with God and won. They literally, was it you that told me about their Holy Trinity? Like we have God the Father, God the Holy,
No.
God the Son, the Holy Spirit.
No,
their Trinity is Yahweh, Moloch, and themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Really? Fascinating.
Yes.
Moloch.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh, come on. You don't know that they worship the volcano demon. Come on.
Okay.
Well,
anyway.
the foreskin-eating volcano demon. That's for a whole, probably another time. But like, yeah, I know people, myself included, Mike Enoch unironically believed that the Jews worship a foreskin-eating volcano demon.
Well, I mean, they can't worship God is the thing. And this is important, I think, just to throw out. When it comes to the Jews, that when Christ predicts in the New Testament, there'll not be a stone left on stone in the temple, it's got to be understood that the Old Testament traditions needed the temple and they needed the records of the priesthood because that was an ethnic thing. That was a family thing that had to be traced. The destruction of the temple in 70 AD ends Judaism. You literally cannot practice Judaism past 70 AD because the Romans destroyed the records, and they destroyed the temple, and they scattered the Jews. So the religion that comes after 70 AD has nothing to do categorically with the Old Testament because they can't practice that. That's why you get, the term they use, they don't have priests anymore. They have rabbis. And rabbi, of course, means teacher. So you could have a Spanish rabbi, you could have a math rabbi, right? It's just teacher. They can't have a priesthood anymore. They cannot commune with God as they once did, and this was predicted that any covenant or connection they had with God is destroyed. When Jesus is walking on the road and he sees a tree that has no fruit, he touches it and kills it. He doesn't leave it alone. He touches it and kills it so that it could never bear fruit again. This is the Jews. They are totally disinherited, and Judaism is not a real religion. This is very important for us to understand. This is not Old Testament. This is not Moses. This is not Abraham. This is something created post 70 AD to justify hatred of Christendom and self-worship and worship of money. I mean, it's not the same religion, just historically and categorically.
Very much so.
And on that, it's important to note because it can sound like we're speaking crazy. I know how this sounds to outside, but I can tell you, they rely on people being ignorant of this stuff because the Jews of today are the Pharisees, and any religious studies class, any objective religious studies that is being honest will tell you that the Jews of today are Pharisees. It's important. People forget this, that they have no connection to those people in the Old Testament. That's gone. That's completely gone. These are literally the descendants of the people who wanted to kill Christ.
I don't even know if they can claim that, especially considering Talmudic law and Jewish law requires that the women be the one to bear the line of Judaism. Most of the genetic studies that I'm familiar with of the Jewish people, it's mostly men that migrated into Europe, married some shiksas, became Ashkenazim, and continued on their religious practices. So they can't even claim any, by their own rules, I don't think, they can't even claim any religious connection to the people of the Old Testament. But the Pharisees, I think, they very much are the Pharisees, but that's an attitude. That's more of an attitudinal thing, I think. It's a personality type.
Yeah.
Neurotic self-servers.
Right.
It just so happens that that's a genetic trait, and the Jews just embody that to the nth degree.
Well, I mean, there's been different, different forms of Judaism, especially in that time period. You had the Essenes, you had the Pharisees, you had the I'm not remember, but just
Sadducees.
The Sadducees.
Thank
yeah.
you, Sadducees.
Pharisees, Sadducees, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And all we have today now are literally Pharisees, and there's no, you're not taught them. They rely on our ignorance of this, that they've condensed it all into one simple. Well, I mean, I guess they have their own off branch of that. Still, they're Pharisees. I mean, that's all they are. And the fact that this is never brought up within, in our own church teaching is very worrisome.
No,
I mean, just think about like what these Jews are looking for. Sorry to cut you off, Johnny, but like, in terms of the Christian belief, and what's interesting, even go back in terms of Arians, the Roman term for Zoroastrians was magi, and of course Zoroaster before Christ predicted the coming of a Messiah, a Savior, and through following their folkish Aryan religion, the first people to worship the Christ are Aryans from Persia, which is something that's I think is interesting to note. But if you really look at it, these Jews, the Messiah has come, he has died, and he has risen from the dead. He has been able to tear death apart, to break open Hades. This is Christ, one of the members of the Trinity, and that's not good enough for them. They're literally waiting for their Messiah to come. So who are we waiting for as Christians? Who do we understand is going to be coming to this earth that will come looking like a Messiah, but will be made of evil? It's the Antichrist. These Jews are literally believing and waiting for the coming of the Antichrist to worship him. They're demon worshipers in the truest sense because they're waiting to literally worship the devil incarnate in flesh instead of God incarnate in flesh. They are the opposite of everything good, holy, and wholesome.
Funnily enough, go ahead, Borzoi.
And their actions derive from.
One more time, Borzoi, you broke up there. I didn't catch that. And
their actions derive.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and if you know anything about their books, the Talmud, they not only do not believe that Christ is the Messiah, they believe that Jesus is in hell, burning in a vat of feces, and depending on which translation you read, semen. A bunch of nice people.
Funnily enough, they're very pleasant people to be around, I can assure you. But funnily enough, either Ted Cruz or Benjamin Netanyahu would fit the version of the Jewish Messiah a lot better than Jesus would.
How
Go
Ted
figure.
Cruz?
Elaborate?
Go ahead. Go ahead with the Ted Cruz thing.
He's a major Zionist shill, and
okay.
his positions on Israel are pretty much the same as any Israeli politicians. He's willing to fight. He's willing to fight for Israel down to the last American.
I thought you meant like physical.
What's that, Borzoi?
I thought you meant physical for a moment.
Well, from what I hear from people who interact with Jews an awful lot, they are a very doughy people. It doesn't matter their body type; they always just feel like cookie dough. So, and
Why would you want
Ted
to touch?
Cruz does look
Why
like-
would you want to touch one?
Oh no, you don't touch them; they touch you.
This is true. Yes, or they touch themselves near you in a potted plant. But anyways, that's a whole other thing. Speaking of the Talmud,
That's not even Paranormies. That's just in the normie news.
that's just normie news. Yeah, that was like paranormy news for a while, and then all of a sudden it just busted out, and now it's Me Tooism is everywhere. I was gonna say is speaking of the Talmud, that and Matt, how you said how what they believe now is no longer Judaism. Well, you have the original 5 books, the Torah, were the original books of the law for the Jews, and Jews being, the Pharisees being such Jews that they are, in order to circumvent their 5 books, they wrote 27 books on how to get around those 5 books, basically.
Well, exactly. I mean, like the very idea, the term of Shabbos goy, right, is you'd hire someone like us to turn the light switch on, or the what's around. And it amazed me the first time I read about the wires that are around some of the world's largest cities that were, put up by the Jews. So they're technically enclosed, they're technically home. So certain, laws when it comes to the Sabbath and things like that don't apply. I mean, the Jews, they don't love God because to love God, or for our pagan comrades to love tradition, the gods, things like that, there's a degree of humility where you are trying to follow rules and standards set before you as your ancestors have. And the Jews do everything they can to get around them. That if they actually loved God, they would just follow his rules, right? But they don't do that because they love themselves. They're inherently the most selfish people in the entire world. They are the epitome of the fallen state of man when it comes to the idea that, oh, God, we don't need God, that God is like, totally legalistic, like God's autistic, right? Like, oh, he got away, the Jews got away out of the programming. God's not autistic, he's all-knowing, but their self-glorification, they literally think they're smarter than God. If you think you're smarter than the omnipotent creator of the universe, then you don't actually love him or even like him. You're actively opposed to think his rules and standards to try and help you conduct your behavior as a husband or as a wife or as a child or as a business owner, or just a citizen of a nation isn't good enough. You know better than God, and if that's the case, then you are truly worshiping yourself.
This legalism is present even throughout the Old Testament. This is a thing way back in the day when they were writing this stuff down. The language of the atonement, the language of the law, there's nothing like it in the ancient world or even today. It's extraordinarily.
Hello.
Uh-oh.
And I think that ties into
Hold
why
on one
God
second,
chose-
Miles. Time out. We lost you there for about 5 seconds. Could you go back and whatever you just said, say it again?
Okay, yeah, I just noticed my connection cut out. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
Grazie, RCN. But the legalism that Matt was talking about is present even in the Old Testament. This is not something that's only the case in the post-Christian order. It's something that's present even in the Old Testament. And I think that God chose these people who are so egotistical and are so stiff-necked that in order to prove his point, the Old Testament is essentially whenever God interacts with these people in any meaningful sense, it's always, these are really crappy people. I don't know how you make, like a lot of the medieval philosophers and theologians would make excuses for people like Joshua, who took away his brother's birthright for a cup of soup. Like that is not, I don't know how you try to defend that. That's a really crappy thing. Thomas Aquinas made a defense of that, and it just falls so hollow. The Old Testament in any meaningful sense, and where God interacts with the Jews in any meaningful sense, is just a history of how crappy they are to each other, how crappy they are to other people and to each other. And I think that's the point. So you have this, God chose the stiff-necked people to try to bring good out of this worst evil, this crummiest people on the planet. who are just so crappy, from being slaves in Egypt to being at the crossroads of empire in the Mediterranean, being bought and sold into slavery, and it just turned them into just horrible psychopaths, and God
Oh.
can still bring good out of that. And
I'm
that
not
is
even-
why he chose them.
I'm not even sure about the whole being bought and sold into slavery in Egypt thing. There's a whole kind of school of thought at like Moses was actually a pharaoh. This is Paranormies type stuff, but that they were actually a labor class in Egypt, and that they were the merchant class as well. And a lot of their old history is just ripped off Egyptian history. I mean, when you invent things like public relations and marketing, you tend to be really good at it. I'm pretty sure that they've been persecuted and picked on their whole entire career, right? I mean, I don't know how much of that is actually true, per se. Because if everything else is a lie, why wouldn't that be?
Not enough of it.
Right.
Well, there's a lot to really dissect in that narrative. Like, what do we mean by slave? What do we mean by this? Is the
Right.
There's a lot of chronological revisionism that has to go on. So that's a whole other episode in and of itself. But just assuming for the sake of the argument that it's true, it makes sense why they're such a crappy people. And God chose these people to bring out. He says, here's the law. Here's what you do. It's not a matter of faith. It's a matter of obeying me when I tell you what to do. And I smite you. I swallow you up into the earth for not doing it. And they still can't do it.
Right.
But God still manages to bring Savior out of that.
So here's, like, we could talk about this all night long. Believe me. I thought I was woke on this stuff. And then I read this book. I'm going to read, Johnny, if I might, I'm going to quote something from the introduction to the Italian edition of The Plot Against the Church.
Yeah.
For example, in this struggle, participators we will prove by means of irrefutable evidence the following saints: St. Ambrose, Bishop of Milan; St. Jerome; St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo; St. John Chrysostom; St. Athanasius; St. Gregory; St. Basil; St. Cyril of Alexandria; St. Isidore of Sevilla; St. Bernard; Tertullian, as well as Origen, the latter two during their periods of indisputable orthodoxy; the Fourth Lateran Council; Duns Scotus, Thomas Aquinas. So the first 4 or 5 guys that in there are known as what is doctors of the church. And in the Western Church, there are about 35 of them, and they're persons for whom their teaching is universally applicable for all Christians. And most of those guys are actually recognized by both churches East and West. Augustine, everyone prior to the split. So that would have been Gregory of Nazianzus, St. Basil, Cyril of Alexandria, Isidore of Sevilla. All of these guys universally acknowledged by all Christian liturgical Christian churches as teachers of the faith. They're the next best thing to like the scripture itself in terms of teaching authority in the church. If I'm wrong here, Matt, please correct me for the East. But the entire history of the church, all of its great teachers, all of its saints, whether it's like the St. John Chrysostom's sermons against the Jews, or St. Louis IX's trial of the Talmud, have looked at these people and said, this is not acceptable. And people look at all of our friends, and this why I wanted to do this episode is we have friends in this thing that are former Catholics or former Christians because the church basically betrayed them. The church has asked them, the counter church, as it were, has asked them to destroy their lives, to insist that water is not wet, and to do all these things, and people have left the church. And as a Christian, I believe it's a really serious thing when someone leaves the church. That there could be people I care about lost to lost eternally because of leaving the church. And this is a serious deal, and they left because of Jewish lies and subversion.
Well, and something I just want to throw in there just super quick. I think it's important because people ask, if you come from a Catholic tradition, oh, the Pope did this, X, Y, or Z. Or, I mean, in the East, we still have problems. I mean, I was raised Catholic. Of course, I'm a convert to Orthodoxy. But, like, oh, this bishop did that or said that, and that's really gay, and I don't like that. How do you handle that? And one of the most important things to remember is St. John Chrysostom, one of the holiest saints, literally said that, that the church says that he was the golden mouth, that he just was able to speak truth. He said, the road to hell is paved with the bones of erring priests, with the bones of bishops as their signposts. And What we have to do, what Christianity at the end of the day, and I believe in church hierarchy, just like I believe in hierarchy within a nation, within a family, within a community, but it must be understood that if you are standing on tradition, if you are standing on truth, I don't care how fancy the guy's robes are, or how many carats of gold he's got in his cross, or what degree he has from a theological institution. If it goes against natural law, because God himself created natural law, like I'm a National Socialist, because National Socialism is the political application of natural law, which God created for the harmony of family, community, and nation, and all the nations, in fact. So if a bishop or a priest or something tells you something that is wrong, you do not follow it. It is your duty to reject that, in fact, because you are bound to the truth. Because God, Christ is the Logos, we are tied to truth. If you follow truth, you will follow God. It doesn't matter what this modern fallen age tells you.
Well, and to kind of get into, I mean, of course, you're completely right there, Matt. But let's turn back the clock here for just a second. This book was written, The Plot Against the Church, was written in 1961 and 62, right before the Second Vatican Council. Now, at that time, things, people think, oh gosh, things were so much better back in the day. No, they'd had their hooks in pretty bad. The church and Myles is going to get into the church, the evangelical church and the subversion there, but I'll just briefly talk about how the Catholic Church was under siege by the communists, which really means the Jews. In Poland and Hungary, right? Bela Kun had who was a monster, right? He'd briefly taken over Hungary in the 1920s, and then of course the Iron Curtain. And Poland, of course, was under the boot heel of communism from 19 onward. In Bavaria, there'd been the attempted 1919 revolution, and of course the communists had tried to destroy the church in Bavaria, which was the most Catholic part of Germany. All the way back into the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. The communists had, who never once, despite being radical communists, always protected the Rothschilds' property in France. Shocking, I know.
Imagine my shock.
Right. This Paris Commune, right? They completely overthrown the government of Paris, and they they smashed a bunch of churches in Paris and burned, attacked nuns and priests and stuff. The quintessential thing of what it means to be French, right? Of course, there was a horrible Spanish Civil War, and I can recommend a really good book by Walter Carroll, The Last Crusade, about the Spanish Civil War. And they killed thousands of nuns and priests. Thousands. Raped nuns, murdered priests in the most despicable ways you could possibly imagine. So literally every Western country, every Catholic country, they tried to destroy the church in the West. And in the East, and I'll kick it over to Borzoi and Matt here, they tried to destroy the church in the East. So, there's not one place, not one denomination, not one location, anywhere in Christendom where these people didn't try to destroy the church. Nowhere.
So kind of the prelude to whole plot. They decided to try to destroy it from within after they failed to destroy it from without. Huge in the communist Russia topic. Up quite a bit on.
Hang on a second,
Twitter.
Borzoi. You're cutting in and out really bad, dude.
I bet the Semites are behind this.
I would wager a guess that it was the Jews.
Well, considering all the links that
You're okay?
Now you seem okay, yes.
it's a little better.
All right, I'm going to try this again. So the Jews tried to destroy the church from without, externally, previously in communist Russia. Something I love talking about on the God Twitter, that there's these things called Komsomol Christmas. Komsomol was kind of the communist youth league of Russia, and what they did to try and get people to stop being Christians, to stop going to church, is horribly verse. I'm going to paraphrase from Michael Burleigh's Sacred Causes. It appears that the Bolsheviks thought in 1922, at the suggestion of Skvortsov-Stepanov, Komsomol anti-Christmas was celebrated in Moscow and over 400 other cities in order to cure the Russian people of their superstitious customs. On Orthodox Christmas Day, January the 6th, 1923, processions formed up at noon and paraded until dark. The marchers included students, members of women's organizations, and working class, with horsemen following behind holding anti-religious banners. These were followed by trucks bearing clowns mocking God, figure of God embracing a naked woman, and mock priests and rabbis chanting indecent versions of religious liturgies and standing in ridiculous poses. This parade culminated in images of Buddha, Christ, Muhammad, and Osiris being burned on the bonfire. To liven up the proceedings, Komsomol carol singers went from house to house singing an adapted version of the Christmas troparion of the Orthodox Church. Thy Komsomol Christmas, restoring to world the light of reason, serving the workers' revolution, blooming under the five-pointed star, we greet thee, son of the commune. We see thee on the heights of the future Russian. Komsomol, glory to thee. So we're talking about stuff that's extremely blasphemous. Now, this did not pan out well. This had an incredibly poor reception from most people. There was a surge of anti-religious activity when the League of the Militant God was founded in 1955, and this was under the leadership of Emelian Yaroslavsky. I don't think I need to even say that. This got such a poor reception that even the main whatever the main government of Russia, but even they shut it down. It's just so embarrassingly bad that they decided that they can't do this. So, kind of brings it more to, they realize they both. I don't know if maybe Matt knows a little more about it.
Well, I mean,
they did.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me, they literally marched peasants out at gunpoint, made them burn their icons, or they would literally rape the wives and children and kill them, or burn their houses down with them inside. I mean, absolutely horrific things. But it's amazing to remember that tens of millions, I mean, legitimately tens of millions of Orthodox Christians were killed in this attempt to destroy Orthodox Christianity in the Soviet Union. But what's the first thing that happens? Because the thing about communism and leftism is it wants to destroy everything that's good. Jose Antonio, the founder of the Spanish Phalange, said pretty famously that the right wants to conserve everything, including injustice, and the left wants to destroy everything, even things that are good. And that's what the left really does. And wanting to dismantle everything that's good. You look at the Soviet Union, removing the beautiful iconography and things like that, and having this really kind of postmodern, very bizarre sort of art and stuff like that. And literally the second that we get German tanks rolling on the Soviet Union, people realize, these Jews realize, as they've been trying to destroy Christendom, as they've been trying to destroy religion and nationalism, all the things that we believe in, they realize peasants aren't going to die for that. The abstraction of the the supposed proletariat state, where of course one of the first laws passed in the Soviet Union was banning anti-Semitism, because everyone knew who the commissars were. Everyone knew who made up the initial governments, who were the NKVD officers in the Soviet Union, and they had to literally save their skin, stop their anti-religious campaign, let the priests out of prison, let the churches reopen, and really stop what had been at that point a generation of extreme persecution of the Christian faith. But even Stalin's alleged to have said, throwing his hands up prior to this point, as long as there are babushkas, as long as there are grandmothers, we'll never be able to remove Christianity from Russia, because it's such a strong part of the folk tradition, of the belief system, of how society is organized. And I mean, they murdered tens of millions of us for the express purpose of stopping things. But you can read, there's a great book about Father Arseny. He was a priest who was locked up in the gulags during the Cold War, and they beat him, they abused him, all these horrible things, but he spread the gospel. while he was in there and baptized people and saved souls. So even when they killed people, they made martyrs. When they tortured us, it didn't change anything. And it's important for us to know that the Jews can't beat truth, right? Like when things look dark now, not just even religion, when it comes to politics, when it comes to our society, the family, the Jews can't beat truth. It can't be done. There's no amount of bodies of ours they can stack up or imprisonments that they can do of our comrades to stop truth. Because truth will always win out. It will always. And the abuse of the Orthodox Church in Russia and in Eastern Europe was essentially a total failure. Because now, at the end of following the end of the Soviet Union, there was a very low religious attendance in Russia, but now they're over 75%. And in less than a generation, the faith has blossomed due to the blood and sacrifices of the martyrs. So this just goes to show lies cannot cover up the truth.
And unfortunately, though, for our lesson, we're not going to by violently.
Damn it, Borzoi, you're cutting out again. Sounded like you had something really good to say too.
Unfortunately for our brothers in the West, the lesson they learned from that they can't destroy the church externally; they destroy it
internally.
Well, and saying, right? Like look at the Visegrad group, right? They Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Austria, right? These are the countries that were under communism. Had faced the Turk together for 300 years, and then been under communism, and like Viktor Orban is the most based man in Europe because he, Hungary has been there before, and Byzantine Catholics had been destroyed, Roman Catholics had been destroyed. Anybody like evangelicals had been destroyed. Anybody who was genuinely Christian in the Soviet Union was attempted to be destroyed. Like they wouldn't let anybody have anything. And I was telling the guys earlier before we started recording that like my jimmies have been permanently altered by this book. And like the first part of this book, the first maybe 20 pages, and Matt's read the whole thing, and I've read most of it. So Matt could maybe speak to this more, but like it is literally just like a gigantic, like horse pill size red pill suppository with sandpaper. Like it is like, here are the people who did all the stuff in Hungary. Oh wait, Bela Kun, like just Jews in Poland, Jews in Hungary, Jews in Russia, Jews in like literally everywhere that the communists were, in Spain, in Italy, it was all Jews. Literally all Jews.
Everywhere. Yeah, you can't get away from that. It literally, and that's it.
Okay, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, right, the most famous author in the world. He won the Nobel freaking prize. Like his most famous book, right? Like it can't get published in English. Like you have to I had to go to a freaking special lecture, and talk to a professor who is a Solzhenitsyn expert, and I got one chapter of 200 years together with Jews, the Jews and the Russians, because Solzhenitsyn, was woke AF on this thing, and he knew, like everybody knew back when, who the people were, he talks about that it was this foreign imposition on the Russian people. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just the Russian people, of course, as the biggest Orthodox community. They were particularly harshly targeted, but it was the Galicians, it was the Poles, it was the Hungarians, the Greek Civil War. I mean, it is literally any genuine believing Christian community. They've attempted to destroy it.
Well, Christianity has to be destroyed because they hate Christ so much.
Right, because he's, what is it, boiling in a vat of semen?
Boiling in a vat of
in the Talmud?
Feces and semen, yes, that's where he is. Yeah.
Well, it's also because it's our faith as well. I mean,
exactly, it's the faith of the Aryan. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You also have to remember, I mean, communism in general, you go back to Bolshevism, it is Jewish Bolshevism. The Bolsheviks were, 88% Jews. The Mensheviks were all Jews. I mean, both communist parties at the beginning of communism were both literally 100% Jews. Lenin was a Jew. Trotsky, Lev Bronstein was a Jew. Stalin, Now, this is one that you red pilled me on. I was always under the impression that Stalin was not a Jew, but he was married to one. But you say
he was married to like 3 Jewesses, wasn't he?
Yeah, 3 Jewesses, and he's got like what 7 Jewish kids. His granddaughter's hot. Oh, you guys seen pictures of her? The punk rock looking. She's thoroughly disgusting looking. Like Mussolini's granddaughter is gorgeous and very refined looking, where Stalin's granddaughter looks like something like the gutter punk trash. But it's very fitting.
Surprising nobody.
Yeah, literally, yes. But like, yeah, all the roots of communism. When the communists, when they murdered the Tsar and his family, the Christian Tsar and his family, they imposed, the commissars. And the commissars, what were they? 300 and I'm gonna forget the numbers. 350 something commissars, and 280 of them were New York Jews. Like,
well, and let's not forget with the murder of the. One of the most important things that's coming out now is the church, actually in Russia, is investigating if it was a ritual killing, a specifically Jewish ritual killing, which is something that we've known for almost 100 years. That, like, when they killed the Tsar, like, you think about this wasn't just a political opponent to murder the Tsar and his family, who, my firstborn son is actually named after, because Tsar Nicholas II is a saint in the Orthodox Church. But they didn't just kill him. They didn't just whack him and his family. They actually did a ritual. They did a blood ritual with this killing to give it supernatural demonic power. And that might sound crazy to your average person, but this is what the Jews truly believe. Like, if you don't believe in faith or religion, whatever, that's fine. But the Jews believe it. And that's how they organize the murder of the Tsar. So it's at least real to them and how they act in the world.
And that's one thing we say on the Paranormies a lot. Is whether or not you believe in it, they believe in it. Whether it's the New World Order, whether it's the Jews, or whatever it is that they're doing, whether they're doing these ritualistic things with MTV Music Awards or a murder or whatever, you don't have to believe it because they do, and that's them. That was a ritual blood sacrifice, which they've been doing for thousands of years, and it's an offering to the demon, to Moloch.
Well, yeah, the blood Bible is real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, real.
And they always say, well, it's not real because like all those murders, they're just copycat murders. They're not copycat murders. They're the exact same thing. That's what a ritual murder is. A ritual is the same thing over and over and over again. It's not a copycat. It's a ritual.
And you can't deny it if you're a Christian. Like, as an Orthodox Christian, I've got an icon in my son's room of Saint Gabriel of Bialystok, a child that was kidnapped by the Jews, tortured, drained of his blood, and crucified. And the most horrific things, this happened to children in Europe. And this isn't just limited, tiny stories. And let's remember, our ancestors, while they might not have had the education or the internet like we do, they were more pure and probably more intelligent people than we are, because they weren't as poisoned by this society. And the idea that all the way from England to Russia, in every European country, there was case after case after case of Jews kidnapping Christian children, torturing them, killing them, and drinking their blood in bizarro rituals. I can't believe that, like, a bunch of peasants in Portugal and a bunch of peasants in France and peasants in Romania came up with the exact same story because they didn't like a Jew for a random reason. No, this is what they actually have done for centuries. And look at abortion, what they do now. They actually don't have to kidnap a child for a goyim anymore. We pay them to kill our own children and hand the body over to them. I mean, it's crazy, but it's satanic. For parts
like a used car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly satanic.
We're supposed to politically compromise with people who think that you can sell a baby like a 57, like a 93 Ford Taurus, and you're telling me that I'm the bad guy? Excuse me, no, I'm not the bad guy. I'm gonna get a little triggered here and get a little annoyed, but this is exactly what our opponents believe. They think that you can chop up a little kid and sell him for parts like a fucking 93 used like a 93 freaking Ford Taurus. And we're supposed to compromise with people that think you can do that. And then when you point out that, hey, you think it's okay to chop up children and sell them for parts, I'm the anti-Semite and I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
No.
Somehow they have the moral high ground on you. What's wrong with you? You're opposed that you don't want women to have their freedom to do what they want.
Yes, that's correct.
It makes you really wonder as well about the murder of Alexei. Closing up note on the murder of the Romanov. Alexei, the heir, he was, according to the executioner, the last to die. He was a hemophiliac as well, and according to his executioner, to go by their report, he put up a fight, until the bitter end. If you take this ritual, the theory of what it paints a very disturbing picture on Roman.
The poor kid.
Well, I mean, this is why, this is why in the 1930s and 40s, and our listeners need to understand this. This is why Europeans geeked out a little bit. When it comes to the Iron Guard, the Iron Guard is great for a variety of reasons. I'm literally looking at a picture of Cadriano over my computer. The Iron Guard is the one group in World War II that actually literally did everything they were accused of. Where the SS had to write reports of these guys are out of control. We can't control these legionaries because they're literally kosher slaughtering Jews. And they're saying it's in repayment for all the ritual slaughters they did, the Jews did on their people over the last couple centuries and stuff like this. Because when white people, we understood what was going on, we understood what they were doing, and anti-Semitism, it doesn't just come out of the sky. It comes out of experience with Jews and the persecution of our children. I mean, you look at that pornographer in the 1970s that said, Jews do pornography because we hate Christ. Everything that we oppose, whether it's feminism or abortion or pornography or open borders, is because these Christ-killing Jews are absolutely at war with the natural world. And white people are pretty nice. We're pretty chill individuals. But there just comes a point where we can't take it anymore because we have to defend our families. Yeah, don't make the white kids angry. Just don't do it.
It's what they say. There's two things they say. Wherever you find anti-Semitism, you'll also find Jews. And the other thing is white people.
There's fire!
It's right. White people are nice until they're not.
So, a couple things
This
here.
is what
quick.
it looks like when white people chimp out, smash cut to a Germans marching.
That's right.
So first of all, right, there's a reason, right? Literally every Christian power in Europe, whether it's the Rexists in Belgium, and Matt, you can speak to this much more than I can, but the Fascists in Italy, the Rexists in Belgium, the Phalange in Spain, everybody, the Vichy in France, the hardcore religious people in literally every country in continental Europe joined the SS in droves and went to go kill them some commies. That's literally what happened everywhere. And we've kind of this is such a huge issue. We've kind of been all over the place, but literally everywhere that this has happened, they get called the bad guys for believing the stuff that their ancestors believed. And we are doing nothing more than going back to the Christianity of our great-grandparents. That's it. And we'll get into more of this in the second hour, I guess. But when someone tells you, oh, Christianity is cucked, or, oh, you guys are lame, or whatever it is, that, and to be fair to our atheist friends in the movement, there's a lot that's wrong with the church right now. But remember that there was a time and a place where Jews were deathly afraid of one Christian cleric getting a hold of their Talmud.
That's right.
And they have done everything they can to destroy the Christian church, and it's not without reason that they've done so.
Well, and just remember, as kind of a final thought, that old Baptist hymn, old time religion. You have to think about it. Give me that old time religion. It was good enough for Adolf Hitler, Charles Martel, Leon Degrelle, and the defenders of Europe for 2,000 years. I think it's good enough for me.
I agree with you 100% on that. All right, and on that note, this is a
you mean that old
time religion. I know. I'm gonna find that and throw that in for the break. But speaking of the break, we're gonna take a break, and we'll be back after this.
Give me that old time religion. It's good enough for me. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Well, it was good for our mothers. Yes, it was good for our mothers. It was good for our mothers. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. It makes me love everybody. Makes me love everybody. Makes me love everybody. And it's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. And it has saved our fathers. It has saved our fathers. It has saved our fathers. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. It will do when I'm dying. It will do when I'm dying. It will do when I'm dying. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Well, it will take us to heaven. Yes, it will take us to heaven. Oh, it will take us to heaven. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Yes, it's good enough for me.
All right, everybody, we're back. This is still the Paranormies presents the Ahnenerbe Hour. I said it wrong again. I don't care. I'm still Johnny Monoxide with our all-star panel of Myles Poland, Matthew Heimbach, Dark Enlightenment, and Borzoi. Borzoi is going to have to take off pretty soon. He's got another little thing going on. It's a little show called The Fatherland. It's all good.
I'm only sorry that my internet connection was so bad.
That's okay.
You know, I've
That's
heard
okay.
of the Fatherland, but I've never listened to it. But I hear it's good.
It is good. It's a good show. It's
No, I listen to it all the time.
I know.
Well,
I know.
If we're plugging things, I just released my Zardoz episode with Jim on it. So there you go. Go listen to that.
Ooh, okay, another pause button. But speaking of pause, nice segue. Let's talk about the church some more and some of the subversion and pause. I believe Myles, you were gonna lead in the second hour with some stuff.
Yes, I think we talk a lot about, well, the Jews subvert this, the Jews subvert that, the Jews subvert this, that, and the other thing, and they subvert everything, and how are they doing this? But what doesn't get talked about a lot of the time is the mechanism by which they do this. And I think it comes down to personality traits, by and large. I don't think it's necessary. Like, I think it could have been another way that left-wingers are brutal sociopaths, liars, connivers, projectors, and just damaged people. They're very much what Eric Hoffer called true believers in his book of the same name. Just vile zealots. By contrast, conservatives tend to be conservative by nature, and I think a lot of the time their politics are very informed by their personality traits. I don't think it had to be this way. I think there's definitely a world in which people with right-wing beliefs are the zealots, and people with left-wing beliefs are have more conservative personalities, if not politics. But this is just the way this shook out. So you have a world in which you have normal people who are just trying to go about their normal ways. Take colleges, for instance. So you have a world in which professors of varying political stripes are teaching their ideologies, but you also have this strain of left-wing zealotry. Now, these left-wingers, if you've ever had to deal with them, they do not shut the fuck up. Pardon my language, but they don't. They will not shut the fuck up. Everything is politics. You can't talk about the weather without saying, oh, it's so terrible that Trump's rolling back the Paris Accord. I'm not talking about the Paris Accord, you fucking retard. I'm talking about the weather outside right now. It's probably going to snow. Are you ready for the snow? I don't care about what's going to happen in 50 years after China fills the sky with smog. Not my problem. You can't talk about anything these days with these people because everything has to be about politics because they're true believers. They're zealots. That gets obnoxious after a while, and you can't do anything to these people because of the way the laws are structured. We have a fundamental decency about us white people that we just try to get along, and we don't account for these sociopaths. We don't account for these crazy people. This is what things like dueling used to take care of. If someone gets really obnoxious and starts impugning your honor, like these people always do, they always try to take a swipe at your honor, you say, you know what, I'm shooting you. Tomorrow at dawn, I'm shooting you. And that's how these people would get dealt with, and they try to keep it in check so the worst excesses didn't come out. But thanks to the widespread prosperity we have in the Western countries, because, white agency, it breeds success, these people, we give them the benefit of the doubt, and we think we could just absorb this. And to an extent, we have been able to. As Adam Smith said, there's much ruin in a nation. It's just a matter of how much more ruin we have to go through before we actually get to actual, ruin. And these people, they drive because you can't do anything about them, because you can't address these problems, because you can't reason with these people. You can't bring them over to your side for the most part. You can't convince them of the error of their ways. They're narcissistic sociopaths. And you can't deal with them another way by shooting them in a duel. The only option you have left, if you're going to exist in the world, is to check out, is to go find something else to do. And that's how they take over institutions, by being horrible and obnoxious and bringing in more people who are like them into their folds to replace you. Does that jive with everyone else's experiences, or am I way off the reservation here?
Well, I mean, let's just remember the best quote from the Spielberg award-winning film Schindler's List. That truly moves the spirit and the soul. We're not going to have arguments with these people. And in that scene, if anyone knows what I'm talking about, where the educated Jew like Karl Marx is dealt with. You're right. You can't negotiate with these people because we're factually correct. Like the idea that in this day and age we're like, hey, there's two genders, and they're like, there's actually 100 genders, but bisexuality is still a thing. And you say this is ridiculous, and then they just start chewing on their arm or injecting heroin. These people, when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, when it comes to just absolute science, they have no interest in facts. How can you argue with a crazy person? I mean, you're wasting your time to debate with someone that has no interest in the truth. They have a more dogmatic and fanatical faith than any of us as Christians even have, because they don't even look at their own source material, because even for these communists, the Soviet Union used to throw gays in prison because they said homosexuality was a bourgeois disease. They don't even read their own source material. We cannot negotiate with them.
And I would come back the next day and find that they had gone back to their old ways of thinking.
Yep. I was just gonna say that. That's a good one.
And gradually I began to hate them.
I'm looking forward to the children's book version called My Comfy Chair.
So, Myles, I was unfamiliar with how they subverted the evangelical church. How did they do it?
The evangelical church was was a bit more of an undertaking, because in Protestant evangelical denominations, unlike high church Protestants, you don't have this top-down hierarchy that you could infiltrate your way into. And the method of infiltration, you have. I'm not gonna deny the Jew. I'm not gonna deny the devil his due. There are a lot of really smart Jews out there, and they're the ones who go in there. They do their job relatively well. They infiltrate, but when it comes time to bring people in, they use their clout to bring others like them in who may not be right for the job but are of the tribe. That's how the infiltration works. It's exactly how it works in the, say, the DC metropolitan area. Their entire middle management class is black, and who do they hire? Blacks. They hire their own. It's just that we notice that because they're incompetent. It's a little more subtle with the Jews. So you have a bigger project with all of these various and sundry denominations, like one on every street corner is a different denomination, and they're all mutually, not necessarily mutually incompatible, but they're all different, and so you can't attack them at once. So you have to go for something larger, something that has a lot more influence. And that thing that had influence was called the Scofield Reference Bible. If you've ever been to an evangelical church, just ask the pastor about whether or not he's read the Scofield Reference Bible. Chances are he has, and a lot of his congregants who attend a Bible study have. The Scofield Reference Bible was meant as something to explain a lot of the synchronicity within the Bible. Like, for instance, if you read a passage in Mark, it'll explain like what Jesus is talking, or what scripture he's referencing from the Old Testament. And in that way, it's really good. The trouble is that it promotes, I forget the name of the guy, but the brothers in England. They had a lot of odd views on what would happen during the course of what's described in the book of Revelation. For instance, this is where the heresy of the rapture comes from, and where the Left Behind series comes from. There's really no scriptural basis for that. If you look in the Bible, there's really nothing that describes that. If you look into a systematic theology, there's nothing, it doesn't support a rapture. The rapture comes entirely from the brothers and then was promoted by the Scofield Reference Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It also promotes this idea of the Jews being still the chosen people of God and having a special relationship with God. Not something that they had, but then abandoned by abandoning Christ, or not accepting Jesus Christ. So at the point in the 1800s, the Jews had largely become a non-issue. They had assimilated relatively well in a lot of ways, or had ghettoized themselves to the point of irrelevance. Or they had become essentially Anglo and really managed to work their way into society. So they were kind of a non-issue. They were very, very crypto. So once you start promoting this idea of God, of the chosen people, they don't really have anything to push back against. And there's no internet anymore. There's at this point, there's no coincidence detector that shows up in all your texts. It's like, oh, wow, these Jews, they're up to some shit. And there was no notion of crypto Jews. So it was really easy to sell this notion of this special foreign people being set apart by God, who have this old tradition and have this special connection that we should look up to and that we should embrace as having this connection. It'd be like finding a guy who went, someone who was just thrust forward in time from before the flood, if you can imagine that. Someone who existed before God flooded the earth in the book of Noah. If you know, someone back from that time period who could tell you what that was like. That's what, to a lot of these evangelicals, Jews are like. You could smell the Israel on them. You could smell the Holy Land. It's this special thing because they were told this. And a lot of this comes from the Scofield Reference Bible. And this was promoted, I think it's D.L. Moody.
Yeah, it was D.L. Moody. But the Scofield Reference Bible, I pointed that out many times in Dark Enlightenment. You sent me that article on the Scofield Reference Bible, which is where how Zionism kind of co-opted evangelical Christianity.
Yep.
It's literally, God's chosen people is literally not in the Bible. It's not there. It's literally in the notes to the Scofield Reference Bible, which is what most American Christian churches use. Most your fundamentalist Christian churches. I know for a fact that I own. I mean, from going, like I said, I went to Bob Jones Academy. My family went to Bob Jones. Most everybody I know reads the Scofield Bible. I have two of them. You know, it's got my name in gold on the front. I've had it since I was in high school. That's the Bible we read, and all those notes are where all this stuff comes from.
Yeah, it's not substantiated at all. It's just a theory cooked up by the writer of the book.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, can you imagine if like Mein Kampf had like total Jewish notes? I mean, like we actually can see this like the ADL version, right? Where they're like, well, when Hitler says like, I want jobs for my people, ... And then, down below, what he actually meant was, like, exterminate 6 million Jews and, like, try and take over the world and invade, like, New Jersey. Like, I don't really think it says that, but they're trying to redefine what it says. And they had to do that because, the thing about Christianity is, it's so very clear. I mean, St. John Chrysostom, just to read a quick quote from him, he says, "But today the Jews, who are more dangerous than any wolves, are bent on surrounding my sheep. So I must spar with them and fight with them, so that no sheep of mine may fall victim to those wolves." Like, that's how the church wrote about these people for the entire history. So they literally had to remake the Bible, remake Christian tradition as totally antithetical to the rest of it. I mean, basically, like, when it comes, and it's not just anti-Semitism, it's views on race, it's views on sodomites, it's all this stuff. And basically, the current cultural zeitgeist of America is like no Christian went to heaven until like 1975. Right, like that's when like real Christian, it's like real communism, right? Like real Christianity didn't start till 1975. Like Robert E. Lee owned slaves. There was no way he could have gone to heaven. Like, oh, the defenders of Vienna weren't very like loving of the Muslims coming into Austria. Oh, they're probably in hell too. Like they literally believe like Christianity is like a 40-year-old religion.
Well, you also have the opposite side of that. You also have this notion that no one ever it's everyone goes to heaven eventually. Maybe just we don't want to talk about hell. The only person who goes to hell is Hitler. He's the only person in hell.
He's in there all by himself. Just Hitler, maybe Pol Pot, but
maybe,
Stalin definitely doesn't go to hell. Stalin definitely didn't go.
Pol
to
Pot
hell.
at least trust. Pol Pot at least trust the urbanite. But
yeah. But
anyway.
I had something I was going to say, and I totally forgot it.
Yeah, the Schofield reference Bible was the
what is the deal?
Jewish infiltration and evangelism.
Yes, that's how they got it. Because he was a real good friend of Zionism back in 1885 or something like that when he first did his deal. Yeah. How is it that American Christianity needed to go back to Europe and evangelize Europe with America's Christianity? Is that a Jewish subversion as well? Because like I said, I have cousins and uncles and aunts and stuff that are missionaries and that have gone to Europe to start churches, and they're starting our American fundamentalist Christian churches now. Isn't Europe home of Christianity? Like basically, isn't that where Rome and all that's where Christianity came from? Why are we sending our particular brand back there?
Because America, and this is where I get into real trigger posting. Like, America isn't a real country; it's a Judeo-Masonic empire, and that we haven't remade Europe in our own image yet. That 70 years, plus of occupation of Europe to force our capitalism, our crass consumerism, our nihilism, and materialism hasn't worked. And there's still a pretty strong nationalist bulwark against this sort of stuff. So for the Christians, we have to then have an additional plot to the mass consumerism and atheism to subvert them to advance our right. I think this is just the American empire doing really what it always has done.
There's definitely a component of that to the evangelism. I think the evangelism is more honest than that, though. In the post-World War I order, the Christian faith of a lot of Europeans had been desperately shaken. I mean, you had a generation of people just completely killed off. Combined with the religious order that preceded the Great War, it showed a lot of people. It's a lot like 9/11 was for a lot of the skeptic community, like the Dawkins people, the Christopher Hitchens of the world, where it said that religion is bad, nationalism is bad, this is what happens, you shouldn't believe any of this, we should just subsume ourselves into the giant LCL pool of nihilism and open borders and nothing matters. So that's the order that had taken over in the post-World War I order. Skepticism had taken deep roots in Europe, in the intellectual parlors, and had managed to spread through the universities through the kind of infiltration that I talked about earlier. and it had kind of taken a hold of intellectual life. So the evangelism, I think, is very necessary. I would prefer it not be that brand of Christianity. Any brand of Christianity is better than no Christianity, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I think that's the reason why we're able to do that, is because they've been World War I was the big impetus for a major loss of faith in the European continent.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I was kind of just hoping to trigger Matt into saying what he said too. But, oh no, I
behind World War One. William.
Whomst was behind.
He raises a very valid point.
Oh, hold on.
Whomst was conservative Christian art. What?
No, go ahead.
Was behind World War One there, Goyam?
Oh, I wonder.
It wasn't for the, if it wasn't for the Titanic, I mean the Oceanic, we wouldn't have World War One. We got into all that right earlier on the Paranormies. Yeah, isn't it weird how the sinking of a ship actually caused all the bad things in the 20th century?
Yeah, it's a butterfly flaps its wings and Haiti gets 40 feet of water.
Sweet.
I think Johnny and you and I are supposed to do that episode next week about how. But
about just conspiracies in general, yeah. There's so many. Yeah. There's so much stuff out there.
But so again, to functioning communities, right? Like World War I destroyed functioning communities in Europe. It destroyed the throne and altar system that had been in place for literally 1,500 years at this point. It destroyed the different churches in Europe. It destroyed a generation of young men in Europe. And all of these confluence things together, right? Leave the church very vulnerable. And for our friends that are secular, our friends that are atheists, our friends that are pagan, like a lot of people who might have been indifferent to religion, or maybe not the best, most practicing, most devout persons, in say 1785, after all these revolutions and upheavals, the church didn't offer them any kind of community, and it didn't offer them any kind of there wasn't, and not that people should join the church because of coat drives or something, but there wasn't even that. And so not only did they destroy the authority of the church, but they also destroyed the ability of the church to form this coherent community where, if you're hungry, you can go to the soup kitchen and someone at the church will feed you. And because there's no one, because the church is impoverished due to this war, and there's no young men to work and fill the coffers of the church with their tithes, or there's no young men to be priests because they've all been killed in this war that wasn't started by white people. And you have this just massive upheaval. And not only did they try to destroy the evangelical church, but they also went after the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. And we kind of touched on a little bit of how that worked. But Matt, could you go to more detail? It's not just us sitting here complaining about Jews. There's actual evidence here, and there's actual books written. Hilaire Belloc's The Jews is freaking great. Everyone should read that. It's for free on I think it's on Gutenberg. Mm-hmm. Belloc, Hilaire Belloc. But I mean, you're the subject matter expert. Matt's written a great piece on, I think it's on Trad Youth, mm-hmm. On the subversion of the Jews in the church.
Oh, that's a great article. And, yeah.
Could you kind of go into that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the most important thing to understand is how our enemies work against anything that rises against them. I mean, there's a reason, just looking geopolitically for a second, Germany is the king paused nation of the planet right now. It's because they dared to resist. I mean, historically, one just has to look at organizations like the Jesuits, for instance. I mean, they were really known, along with different orders, as the hammer of the church, going against the conversos, going against heresy. So they obviously had to be remade in the opposite image. It's a true bastardization. And I mean, in the the World War II environment, we're talking about World War I, post World War II. I mean, let's remember about the Catholic Church. There was one member, to my knowledge, of the upper echelons of the NSDAP that suffered a form of excommunication, and it wasn't Adolf Hitler. It was actually Dr. Joseph Goebbels, because he married a Lutheran. which is kind of like a funny tidbit of history. To remember that even the church, with the attacks that were being levied against it, where they start putting in, I mean, this goes back to the conversos, because let's remember the Inquisition. I'm jumping back really far now, but the Inquisition only applied to Christians. And actually, you were probably better off being caught by the Inquisition for something than a civil government, because the Inquisition had rules they had to follow. It was very scholarly. There was actual representation for both sides. And, if you got arrested...
It was the Inquisition actually championed the start of the inquisitorial method of legal proceedings. Until then, it had been the honor system.
Well, exactly. And, you get caught by your local lord. I mean, he could just kill you without trial in a lot of cases, or torture you indefinitely and things like that. There are people that actually, uttered heresies in court, so it'd be handed over to the Inquisition to get them away from the civil government, right? So, but they were rooting out these conversos because in Spain, after the Reconquista, that a lot of them converted, in terms of presentation, but not in terms of actual belief, and they were working to then subvert the church, working to be able to get involved in business, as they always like to do, and things like that. So the Inquisition was sent to start rooting them out, to start dealing with these problems of these non-genuine conversions. And that's why they really got a chip on their shoulder against the Jesuits and others. So then they had to work to remake them. So as we're looking at World War II, I mean, you've got Waffen-SS soldiers being helped by the Catholic Church to get to Spain and then get into Latin America and stuff like that by the tens of thousands. A very organized network of the church helping people. I mean, when it comes to the Orthodox world, General Vlasov of the Russian Liberation Army, in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, was given an office inside Berlin, was given the support and the praise of the Third Reich in this battle against Bolshevism and communism, and of course capitalism, globalism in general, this sort of full blessing. So then there had to be an extra war waged against these institutions. So what I would encourage people to do, and I found this, I think it's really funny. I mean, we could go into all sorts of names and specifics, but I think it's more fun to go on a journey. Look up like the gayest institutions that make you really angry right now, and then research their actual history. Because I'm going to tell you, 9 times out of 10, they were probably badass back in the day. But the Jews get this chip on their shoulder, and they have to destroy, whether it's a nation, whether it's a legacy, whether it's a group, whether it's a movement. They have a pathological desire to undermine and utterly remake it, to bastardize it, to strike back at ever having someone rise up against them.
Mm-hmm. So
absolutely.
Call back even further in history for just a second, right? Okay, so the Islamic invasion of Europe took place on 2 fronts. In the east, it was Greek Anatolia and Greece, and then the Balkans, the Turks came, and then in Spain, the Moors conquered all the way up to the Pyrenees Mountains, and it was only literal miraculous victories in France and Galicia that kept the Muslims out from just destroying medieval Europe. And the reason, say, Greeks and Byzantine Christians in Constantinople are a little skeptical of Jews, and Spaniards are a little skeptical of Jews, and the reason the Spanish were so keen on the Inquisition in 1492 is they remembered that they went through the longest war in the history of the world, 700 years trying to get their homeland back. And it wasn't the Benedictines who threw open the gates of Toledo, and it wasn't the Benedictines who sabotaged the gates at Constantinople to let in the Muslims. It was Jews. Okay? And so they knew for thousands, literally the entire history of the church, the Jews have tried to sabotage the church and tried to sabotage Christian institutions and peoples. And then in the 20th century, to kind of actually close in on our narrative here, this book, the Plot Against the Church by Maurice Pignet. And Maurice Pignet isn't actually a real guy. It was probably several people who were highly placed within the Roman Curia. This is 1962. This is before things got all paused up. But he had to use a pseudonym because the Jews controlled the media even back then, and they would have hounded these people out of. They would have put them on trial, basically.
Well, they were talking about Jewish control of the media in like the 1890s, weren't they?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's when
believe me, it
Zionism.
goes back.
That's when Zionism first. That's one of the things that they did is it was Zionist control. These Jews in the banking industry. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So anyway, like Matt, if you could talk about like the specific mechanisms they used to Hilaire Belloc is great on the Jews in England, took over England, and like everyone in England knew in like 1910, or I can't remember when this book was written, but everybody in England at the time knew that the wars in South Africa, the Boer Wars, were wars for Jews and diamonds. Like they knew it was the behest of the De Beers family.
Well, exactly. I mean, something I think England, and of course there's the funny joke that I love. One of my Slavic friends told me, you know why the sun never set on the British Empire? It's because
God doesn't trust those sons of bitches in the dark.
There you go.
That's a great one. I've never heard that. That's awesome.
And but you have to look. How does Britain become? And I've got Anglo ancestry and Celtic ancestry along with my German ancestry. So I don't say this as just scolding my finger at a different people. I mean, these are my ancestors too, in some regard, obviously. And what's important to remember is how did Britain become so powerful and get us really into the messes we have today? Like, why does China hate us today? It's because of the 100 years of shame they were forced to live under when the British actually were selling opium in record numbers, forcing it on the people, not paying them in real money for all their natural resources. And they're a very proud people. They're a very honor-based culture. And really, these Brits, I mean, your average Tommy from like the south side of London knows nothing about geopolitics. He just knows, like, all right, I'm here to give opium to Chinamen. Like, okay, I'm here to secure the trade routes. But a lot of like the animosity the white world actually faces comes back to these Jews, because you've got this Jewish level of control of money. And probably the most important thing, and this actually kind of gets into Talmudism, right? If something's wrong, don't do it, even if there's a workaround where you can kind of do it. Because during the Middle Ages, of course, the Bible is very clear that usury is a sin. The idea of you can lend money at interest where you are making a profit without actually exercising any labor or real investment. Instead, you're just lending money at interest. So the monarchs of Europe all became severely indebted. Of course, there's constant conflicts being forced by someone. I mean, again, could have been the Swedes. We don't really know. And, the Rothschild banking institutions, during the Napoleonic Wars, they bet on both sides. So no matter who won, they won. But when Cromwell is looking to overthrow the monarchy with his Roundheads, and of course we end up getting the attempted genocide, essentially, of the Brits, of the Irish, pardon me, but a lot of British people as well, in terms of those who stuck by God and country. Cromwell was able to borrow money at interest from a lot of these Jews, and that's repeated in the Napoleonic Wars, to where the Rothschilds still control, essentially, the institutions of Britain. And this is done all over the world. This is done in France, this is done in Spain, and so on and so forth. So, when you understand that the church is not entirely unique, as we would say, like separate from the state. The idea of the church and the state being one and the same, where it's the people, whereas, Dr. Joseph Goebbels said, the party's job is to get our people, everything they need physically, and the church's job is to get our people's souls to heaven. But what we end up having is this very clear separation, and within European civilization, they were able to use this usury, which Christians could not lend money at interest to other Christians, but Jews weren't bound by our same laws. They were able to actually take over the majority of the institutions. So then they're investing in monasteries, right? You've got these conversos who are going into the seminaries and things like that. You've got Jews that have a lot of money. They're investing in these institutions because it gives them political capital in the immediate, but also gives them long-term influence in these institutions that are supposed to protect us against them. To, within the lords that become indebted, within the merchant class, we get the Masonic element, where the merchants are indebted to the Jews as well, that they actually use their capital. And where Europeans were weak, we failed in this, that we should have said usury is a sin against God and a sin against our countrymen. But instead, we wanted to go and kill and butcher one another on 100,000 different battlefields throughout our history. With Jewish money, where they end up in charge, which then allows them to influence our institutions. So as we're looking at post-World War II, the nationalist movements have been, tragically driven back, defeated. Tens of millions of us have lost our lives. They've got this infrastructure already built where then they can say, with their money, by buying up access to the media and things like that, that now is the time to make the final push. And that's what they did. So I think all this goes back. If I were to have my finger on one issue of the subversion of the church, the subversion of the West in general, the Jewish control over us, it goes back to the Middle Ages, where we decided we were going to betray what we knew was right for the sake of temporary profit, to stick it to one of our countrymen, to stick it to one of our brothers, to stick it to another European, because we wanted to beat them in a war, we wanted to invest more than them or something like that. We went to the Jews for that, and we literally sold our souls, which got us the situation we have today.
Preach.
That's
You're not wrong.
That's pretty. Yeah, no, you're absolutely. Where's the lie? That's pretty clear and concise right there. Go ahead, Myles. What were you gonna say? Uh-oh.
Myles dropped out, I guess. But there's literally dozens of books about this, and hundreds of pages, and you got to take your time because it's really dense reading. But there's an article. I mean, like, if the Jewish Daily Forward wasn't written by like you'd halfway think it was written by our guys.
Article. Oh, yeah.
It's so wrestling because
the title of the article is called "Converts Who Changed the Church." It's a great article that is they tell on themselves basically. They talk about how they took over the Catholic Church. I mean, and they brag about it.
Can you talk about the article you did about this, Matt? Like, I know you did an article that basically like.
Yeah, I mean, we really tried to break all this down because it's important for us to know exactly what they did. And the thing is, it's the chutzpah, right, that these Jews have. There's that Jewish joke that I'm always amused by. A young man wants to get his inheritance, so he butchers his mother and his father. And when he's dragged into court, he starts to weep, and the judge, says, what's going on? And he says, "Have mercy on me, have mercy on me. I'm an orphan." And that's how they do it when it comes to the subversion of the church and stuff like that. They literally have the chutzpah to put it out there and say, "Hey, goys, look what we did to you." I mean, Joe Biden is the best anti-Semite in the world, because when he gave that speech to that Jewish organization and said, Jews being behind feminism, being behind the civil rights movement, being behind mass immigration, you guys were instrumental in all of these things. I mean, when we say it, it's anti-Semitic. When they say it, it's a compliment. But they've got the chutzpah to literally put it in our face and say, "Hey, we're undermining everything that you believe in and that you've built over thousands of years. And what are you going to do about it?" They're literally daring us to respond.
Well, they dare you to respond, and then if you do respond, they call it anti-Semitism, and they call you a Nazi, and they, and they get you fired from your job, or they have you arrested, or they have, they make it even worse for you. It's they hide behind, they hide behind all their institutions.
Like, Matt's a big fan of Father Coughlin, just like I am, and I think our friend Eric Stryker did a very good episode of his show a few weeks ago. Or a few months ago, rather, about Father Coughlin. But height of the Depression, biggest broadcaster in America, Father Coughlin, just preaching that old time religion, just Catholicism as it had always been known, and they freaked out and tried to shut him down. That they didn't argue with him at all. They used their money to get his bishop to silence him on the radio. If America had listened to Father Coughlin, the world would be a much better place today.
Well, yeah, I mean, Father Coughlin said, I see America at a split between the path to communism and the path to fascism, and I take the road to fascism. But I think it's interesting, in terms of the subversion and the attacks against people who are telling the truth. Like, if we zoom into Vatican II, because Vatican II is really important, because it was Johannes Osterreicher, Dietrich von Hildebrand, Carl Them, and Valdemar Gurion were the converts, right, that converted to start really pushing within the church this idea of moving away from the Jews are responsible for the killing of Christ. And you had the truth being taught at pulpits, in the media, and stuff like that. And they would begin to attack that and say, oh, that's backwards. We need to be progressive. We need to look forward. We need to find ways that Jews are clear. This relationship that we start to see. Like, when you really look at it, the Jews are always the ones who are agitating. Father Coughlin had his meetings attacked by the what would be considered nowadays like the Jewish Defense League. The same guys that are being attacked by the or who attacked the German American Bund, who attacked the silver shirts. I mean, this is the sort of thing that the Jews they've got two fronts, right? They've got the physical intimidation, like, we're going to kill you and you're going to lose your job, and then they've got the inside forces that are already inside the gates putting these perverse ideas. And that's something to understand about the Jewish philosophy. They don't go one or the other, because they really think one of those is going to win. They're going to overcome in one way, whether it's through internally weakening an institution or just literally beating its head in and using fear to be able to push their agenda. And that's important for us to understand how they work. They cover their bases when it comes to destroying something they hate.
They always do. That's something they're really good at when they find something that they. I was saying, when they find something that they hate and they want to get rid of it completely. Well, they don't always have to destroy it. They can just subvert it and use it for their own means.
Well, and the forward article itself says they continue to think of themselves as Jews. Like, it, they didn't view themselves as putting on a new spirit as Christians do. They didn't view themselves as taking on a new life in Christ as we're expected to do as Christians. They just viewed themselves as Jews who go to church.
Well, yeah, and let's remember, we can't have any communication with these people. Like, one of the canons of the church says, if any bishop, priest, or deacon, or any one of the list of clergy keeps fast or festival with the Jews, or receives from them any of the gifts of their feasts, as unleavened bread, any such things, let him be deposed, and if he is a layman, let him be excommunicated. As it says, another canon, if any clergyman, layman, enters a synagogue of Jews or of heretics to pray, let him be both deposed and excommunicated. And then we've got the Pope Frank, who's going to burn in hell. Like, I'm going to say this right now. I know I'm not supposed to judge, but Pope Francis is going to burn in eternal hellfire for the things he has done to the Catholic Church and for the souls of millions of people. But he's excommunicated. He's an invalid pope. There are pictures and videos of him going into synagogues to celebrate Hanukkah. That son of a bitch couldn't be a garbage man in the Vatican, let alone the fucking pope. Pardon my language. But, it drives me crazy if you follow the rules of the Christian faith. All of these wolves in sheep's clothing are illegitimate. We don't have to depose them. We don't have to drive them out. They are already illegitimate by their own actions of excommunicating themselves.
Yeah.
And
go ahead, Dark Limit.
It's not even, obviously that's all true. It's that if it actually helped the flock, I could almost kind of see it, like if Nostra Aetate actually helped people, and led them to the truth and led them to the church, I could almost kind of see, like, okay, maybe, but what it's done is destroy the faith, right? Because if the Jews are the same as the Catholics, who are the same as the Muslims, who are the same as the Orthodox, who are the same as the Protestants, why get up early on Sunday morning? If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And they've kind of reworked things so that like there are no distinctions and there's no difference between Jews and Christians, and there's no difference between, you know, together with the Muslims we worship one God. No, we don't.
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't. We don't worship the same God as the Muslims. The Muslims
this is the positive Americanism, man. I mean, and this is Americanism, like Protestantism. Like, if once saved, always saved, washed in the blood, brother. On Sunday morning, be in a brothel. Why be in a church, right? Once saved, always saved. Can't get rid of your salvation. This is the perversion of the destruction of truth. And this comes down to gender, this comes down to race, this comes down to just the understanding of history. The idea that there is an objective, capital T, truth, that as a human being, as a man or a woman, you strive for this, is totally gone, right? Oh, no, a chick with a dick is whatever it wants to be, you know? Oh, you know, what are nations? What is history? They are trying to utterly destroy even the understanding there is a truth. The idea that there is something objectively correct above our own failings or misunderstandings or cultural bias, the idea that there is truth, that they're trying to destroy our even knowledge that such a thing exists.
Well, they want to have it both ways. They want to say, well, the Holocaust was a uniquely evil event in history, even though there's tons of other more murderous regimes that, you know, actually happened. But they want to say this is uniquely evil and you should pay attention to this, but nothing else matters, only this. And people, that just doesn't work with people. Luckily, and people are catching on to the breaks and the internal contradictions, as it were, of Jewish supremacy.
Mm. Yeah, that is true. They are finally starting to catch on to this, whether it's through the church or through seeing that every single one of these people that are sexually harassing people happen to be Jews.
It's like 85% of them.
Yeah. Have you seen that? There's a chart that's broken down. It's got all the Hollywood Jews, or it's just all these the sexual molesters in general. There's like one black dude or two black dudes, George Takei, and then 3 white guys or 4 white guys, and then the rest are just fucking Jews.
And the white guys are all gay.
Yeah, and it's like, Takei and Kevin Spacey, and they're gays. You know, yeah. I mean,
well, and this is a whole separate episode, but to just kind of touch on this, right? Like, one of the reasons the credibility of the church has just crashed, right, is the sexual abuse scandal. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you know, John Jay College. This is not Dark Enlightenment's, reactionary Catholic buddies. This is a secular university in the state of New York. So these are not my friends. They issued a report that like 80% or more of the abuse that took place in the Catholic Church was because of homosexual men attracted to not pedophiles. They were like most homosexuals. They're
ephebophiles.
They like the
ephebophiles.
Ephebophile. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Jews, for teaching me that word.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. It's a word I never thought. Hey, Miles, do me a favor. Can you turn up a little bit? You're a little quiet. But yeah,
anyway.
Another one of those words that I only know because of Jewish perversion.
Right. Anyway, so, but the standards, right? The standards prior to the canons of the church say that a guy who's intrinsically disorderly like that, he's not even he can't even be admitted to the lowest clerical orders. And Matt could probably talk about this more. He's not even supposed to open the door.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the old church, there were 4 clerical orders. There was a porter, archdeacon, deacon, and then a priest. That's the kind of progression you made. And the porter was literally the guy who opened the door and let people acted basically as an usher. Okay. And as far as I recall, and Matt, please chime in here, they weren't even supposed to be allowed to do that.
No, I mean, it's absolute lunacy. The idea in a position of trust to have a sodomite. I mean, let us remember our pagan ancestors bogged these freaks, and our Christian ancestors threw them in jail or killed them because of the perversion and the attack on children. That homos molest children, and they have done that throughout their entire history. They are antisocial, right? This is antisocial behavior. And the church is the ark of salvation. It is the hospital of the soul that all of us as sinners come forward to receive medicine and treatment at the hospital of the soul. And the idea that, I mean, the canons are clearly against this, but the idea of having someone with an antisocial personality be allowed to serve in the most social of positions, whether you're a king or you're a peasant that like lives, you know, in the woods, right? Doesn't even have a hovel to live in. The idea that the church is equally for the highest and the lowest of our society to receive this medicine, to work towards salvation, the concept of theosis, to become one with God Almighty, the idea that on that journey, it would be allowed to allow a frickin' freak like a sodomite to be able to wear the clerical garb of a priest or a deacon or even a porter. I mean, that it's lunacy. And it's very clear that you must be a pious individual. I mean, the canons are hardcore. I mean, due to the degradation of our society, it'd be hard for many candidates to the priesthood to meet. I think it's like if you masturbate more than twice in your life, not to be crude, you're not allowed to be a priest. But to use that as an example, for instance, of the strict standards throughout Orthodox and Catholic, the canons of the standards of who could be a priest, who could interact with children, that even if you jerked off twice in your life, you're ineligible. The idea that you could be a sodomite and be around children or be serving in that position of trust is unthinkable, it is uncanonical, and it is heretical to even think that they would be allowed in that position. So the church tradition is clear that those freaks, like, have mercy on them, pray for them, but they are not made for service in the clergy or anywhere around children.
It's like
right,
and the blood supply, which is something
exactly
that actually do.
Well, and it's because they're narcissists, just like Jews, and this all was changed, right, in Vatican II, and Vatican II happened literally because. Now, I mean, like, Cardinal Ottaviani had, you know, he was the head of the Inquisition. He had the plans, the schema, SCHEMA. For those of you who don't know what this is like your doctrinal plan of the Vatican, and the doctrinal plan of the Second Vatican Council was to be rabidly anti-communist, rabidly anti-abortion, rabidly anti-contraception. I mean, it was supposed to be great, and then it was hijacked by modernists. On the very first day, Cardinal Ottaviani had his microphone cut, and he was an old man. He was in his 80s, I think, and he was like half blind, still sharp as a tack, but, you know, an old guy. And these men who'd been look at Bella Dodd's book, like literally infiltrated by communists for the last 50 years of the church, like from 1910 onwards. They were infiltrated into the church and risen to the length of, you know, and this Pinea book goes into this in great detail. They infiltrated the church, and they stopped the true teaching of the church from being implemented in the council, and they subverted literally everything. This is not just me being parent. I mean,
let's remember, like, we literally have receipts of, like, the KGB or the NKVD sending people off to Orthodox and Catholic seminaries for the sake of subversion. Like, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is, we've got the paperwork of, like, so-and-so, like, is being paid X amount of rubles for him to go and become a Catholic priest and to be able to get the support then of the intelligence services of these Jewish institutions to promote them within the churches. Like literally, even in some cases, like killing political opponents or traditionalists that stand by the gospel of Christ. I mean, we know this for a fact. This isn't even questioned. It's in the NKVD and FSB and KGB archives that are out there. That the Soviet Union did this, and even before that, these Jewish institutions. This is fact that they paid millions of dollars to specifically subvert these institutions. It was worth more than bombs, than tanks, than even nuclear weapons to work to subvert the churches. And let us not forget, the godless Soviet Union is the one that created, along with others, the World Council of Churches, the idea that there is no difference in religion, that we need to just become one thing, and that was the purposeful step towards no religion. Like, they did this. We know they did this, and yet it's still like a radical thing to say that, oh no, like these like Jewish communists literally bought, sold, tortured, killed, and subverted everything to be able to then control the institutions of the church.
Do you think that is because this whole one world religion is because they actually don't have a religion? Judaism doesn't really exist.
Yeah, I mean,
Christianity.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think that I agree with that.
Poland, what'd you say, dude? You were quiet again.
I think it's just a way to attack Christianity.
Yeah.
Por qué no los dos? It's both a hatred of Christianity and when you make this kind of one world man-centered religion, it's very materialist in outlook. You know, it's the Judeo-Masonic outlook, and then it's easy to take over. And then, you know, there was a whole bunch of shenanigans at the Vatican Bank not too long ago. I mean, like they had like not just back in the 70s, but no, like relatively recently, that report on homosexuals in the Vatican Bank got buried. The entire Vatican right now, if people can call me paranoid or what, but the entire Vatican right now is full of homosexuals.
Did you ever read that fun little conspiracy theory about the SWIFT system being cut off to get what was his name, Pope Benedict, out of there?
I red pill me on that way later. I'm like, but send me a DM, dude.
Sure.
Well, he's still alive. Like, Pope Benedict is still alive. He was supposed to be like on his deathbed. That's why he was replaced. Obviously, he was forced out. I mean, I remember when I was a Catholic, going to school in Baltimore, going to the Cathedral of Mary Our Queen for daily mass, because I swear to God, the only thing that got me through the abuse of starting the White Student Union was going to mass every single day. That's the only way it was able to happen. And, you drive by the seminary just a mile up the road from the cathedral, St. Mary's, which, of course, was known as Pink Mary's, because of the homosexuals. And I know people that, like, were good seminarians that wanted to go and serve God and serve the people and got abused and molested by these institutionalized freaks within these seminaries. Like, they legitimately, no, it's not a lie, the Vatican is filled with homos and degenerates and other sorts of types. And that's not an indictment on Christianity. That is proof that the Jews view Christianity as a threat.
Oh, that's definitely for sure. That was one of the reasons why we brought Myles in here. He was going to talk about that. But we seem to be getting getting close to the end of the second hour. We're just going to make this a series. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're willing to have me back, I'm here.
Oh, you're always welcome back, dude. You know that. And Dark Enlightenment's always welcome back. And Myles, you now are, having been a first-time guest, you have to come back again. So,
of course.
Yeah, we're gonna do this a lot more. Let's just call this "How the Jews Subverted Everything." I don't know.
Yeah. An ongoing series.
An ongoing series.
Soon.
Yeah. Yes.
Part 1 of 6 million. But like, if I could wrap it up real quick, Johnny, on my end, and then
you got to take off, right?
I got some family stuff to do.
It's all good.
We used to live in a more honest age, right? I mean, the terrible thing about the internet is, for these people, is that, like, they had everything locked down, right? They had CNN, they had NBC, they had ABC, they had CBS, they had NPR, they had all the radio networks, they had everything, and then lo and behold, like, some white nerds invented the internet. And then all the books that were published before, they had control of everything, were all of a sudden available for free. And people could start reading old books and looking up old facts. And you can't look up old books. You can't read Hilaire Belloc's The Jews. You can't read this Maurice Pinier book. You can't read, a bunch of the other stuff that we've talked about tonight and not come to the conclusion that OG, that guy on the radio at 2:00 in the morning complaining about space lizard Jews, was right. Okay. And why this is so important, okay, at least from my end, is if you don't understand the JQ, you can't understand anything. If you don't understand, like, why, I know lots of trad Catholics who aren't woke on the JQ, and they just cannot understand why things are so terrible. And I know lots of good conservatives who just can't understand why the media is so terrible. And all of this stuff, it all comes back to these literal satanic demons in skin suits who worship themselves and hate all that is good, true, and beautiful. And I didn't used to think this way, but I do now, and it's because I've been exposed to them. That's why they can't let us on the internet. That's why they got to take us out of jobs and render us unemployable and do all this other stuff. You know, if they had their way, Johnny and Matt would be starving to death in a gutter. But because of you guys out there, you know, support the DWP, support what Johnny's doing, and we'll beat these fuckers. Because
To be fair, I could probably use a little starving in the gutter, to be honest.
Same here, Matt. We're both we're thick boys. It's all good, you know. I could be something. It's not my fault. My wife keeps bringing me cookies. You know, like how am I gonna say no?
Me too, but
dude, that's what I'm telling you. I literally had a comrade today, homebrewed beer. My wife has been making Christmas cookies, and I told her, I said, Orthodox Christmas isn't for another like 2.5 weeks. Please stop. And she's like, but it's the Christmas season. Guys, but also we must always better ourselves. And that's where education is so important. Like a podcast can seem like it's just entertainment. But what we're talking about, like, I encourage all the listeners, look up these books. I mentioned some of the individuals that were involved in infiltrating the Catholic Church. Look up these names and educate yourself, because you better yourself in mind, body, and spirit. Because our enemy wants to make us weak. They want to make us pathetic. They want us to be serving them. And every time we fall for the sin and vice that they put forward, whether that's pornography, whether that's eating garbage food, whether that's not giving everything to the sake of our people and the future of our children, they're winning. So the best way to beat the Jews is to better yourself, in terms of your education, in terms of your spiritual outlook. I encourage everyone, if you're not doing it, be fasting. Even if you're not religious, literally fasting, that is discipline to train yourself, to better yourself. This is the sort of stuff we need to be working on to better ourselves consistently. And we would just be crazy guys, standing with signboards on the side of the road if it wasn't for the listeners. So, I just really appreciate being able to be here and talk with so many amazing people, and to know that we are telling the truth. In an age of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's exactly what we're doing. And, Johnny, that's what you've been doing for a long time on this show. And this is so important because we must question what's being told to us, because this is an entire sandcastle built on lies. The Jewish system is a sandcastle built on lies, and the tide of truth is going to wash it away.
Most definitely. We got a lot of work to do. We've started. I think we've got a great movement going. We're doing a lot of exposing of these subversives. But like I said, we still got a long way to go. There's a lot of people are still asleep. Nobody. I think on this panel we got some of the most woke, some of the most wokest of all the goys out there. I mean, but in this whole area, I mean, like, I'm the conspiracy guy, right? So like, but it doesn't take me very many steps to look at a conspiracy and find a Jew. To find Jews behind it. It's that meme. It's the word everything, and then behind it is a bunch of Israel flags. Behind everything, it's the Jews. It's literally true. I mean, you can't. 20
years of Illuminati research. It's the Jews by Facebook.
Right. Yeah, really, it's true. I mean, like, it's all this. It's the Jews. It's all this, like whether it's the gun lobby, or whether it's the 9/11, or whether it's high fructose corn syrup, or GMOs, or whatever this stuff is. It always comes back to this little rootless tribe of cosmopolitans who hate white people.
Well, and and we've got to understand, in terms of, Dietrich Eckart is the guy who literally Mein Kampf is dedicated to, right? The ideological founder of National Socialism, the movement that had a people in a nation smaller than Texas rise up to challenge the entire Jewish system and inspire the entire globe. Dietrich Eckart said, "This war is a religious war. Finally, we see that clearly. A war between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, Christ and Antichrist." And that spirit where we are standing on truth. And even if you're a pagan, if you're agnostic, if you're a skeptic, if you stand for truth, I believe this as an Orthodox Christian, you are standing on the side of Christ, because Christ and the faith are truth. It's the application of truth. It's the belief in truth. It's striving towards bettering yourself towards truth to cast away all these lies. This is a war in everything we do, in mind, body, and spirit, of Christ versus Antichrist, and truth and falsehood. Dietrich Eckhart was right 100 years ago, and this spirit is going to continue in our struggle, because what is true will always healthy families, harmonious societies, and a belief in something greater than ourselves where we better ourselves every day. That is what will always overcome the absolute nonsense and bullshit that we deal with from the current Jewish system.
Amen. Amren Borther. Myles, you got anything you want to add here?
There will come a day when men will go mad, and they will see someone who is not mad, and they will say, "You are mad. You are not like us."
That's where we're at right now.
Yeah, you are here.
You are here.
Well, that's literally a quote from the Desert Fathers. Like, this was true hundreds of years ago. It's true today.
What do you think, like, even not even going back that far, just going back to, like, the Founding Fathers, if they could be alive today and see what's going on, like, just show them pictures of Detroit.
Right.
Well, think about it. Like, as an example, we always say, like, in Pikeville, we had our rally this year in Pikeville, and to be passive aggressive, the town council decided to name two streets for two men who were killed from the county in World War II. Kentucky at the time was had the southern state with the most, like, Jim Crow laws of anyone. So the idea that, like, a bunch of, like, 18-year-old kids from, like, rural East Kentucky were fighting for, like, chicks with dicks is an absolutely ludicrous sort of statement. Same thing with the Founding Fathers. I've got plenty of critiques of them for their Enlightenment era philosophy, but if we were to show them the idea of, like, yeah, so in, like, 200 plus years, there's going to be, like, a black president, and he's going to, like, I don't know, maybe be a Muslim, and like, just open borders, and we're going to murder 3,000 babies a day. Like, do you want to go with this? They would be singing Rule Britannia and God Save the Queen with the most gusto a human being could ever muster, because they didn't, I don't think they wanted this, but if they knew what was going to come from their Enlightenment era philosophy, they never would have picked up a single musket.
Well, my understanding is that things had gotten so bad within the British Empire that they're like, no, we got to go back to the old ways, and so they broke away. Like, the Enlightenment was a step back for them, or a step back.
Yeah, that's
if you can
that's how
that.
that's how I see it too. Is that they were sick and tired of the degradation of the monarchy, as it were, and they were trying to get back to a more principled era, actually.
If you'd been like, "Ayo, TJ, this is how things are going to work out," like this whole men are created equal thing you wrote down, it's not going to end well. He'd have been like,
"Yeah," and then that's the thing with that too. Hold on, and with that too is we leave off at the end of that. If you listen to I did, because David Duke's book is too long to read, but if you go through David Duke's book, and he talks about that, and he says. We leave off at all men are created equal, period. No, there's a whole lot after that. And he was just as much of a racialist as we are, if not even a little bit more. That boy had slaves. So.
Well,
yeah.
Like,
the idea, like, the 40s, and they're like, oh, what? Even, today, our edgiest guys are like, whoa, slow down there, guy.
Yeah.
Right. Like the idea that like, I'm less racist than my grandfather or great-grandfather.
Oh, yeah. We talked about this before. Like, my dad was more racist than me. My grandfather was more racist than him. They just were. It was just naturally they were just naturally like that.
For having the same political opinions as my grandpa, I'm now a Nazi.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are
don't
worry.
I've literally got an armband in the mail to you right now. So welcome to the club.
Nice. I need to get me one of those there, Matt.
I'm buying a Stahlhelm after.
Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah.
Wearing, like,
cereal out of your Stahlhelm.
My robe. No, not out of the show. I'm gonna like wear it around the house and like it'll be my comfy thing. I'll be in my robes, like eating cereal or something like that.
That sounds comfy.
I've got a Roman helmet. They were a lot worse than the Nazis.
Right. Well, wait, are we not supposed to be eating cereal in Stahlhelms? Because I still have my one that I got from Charlottesville. So are we not supposed to be doing that? Because now I feel like a jackass.
Oh no, we're still doing that. No, we're still doing that.
I would.
All right,
we're doing that.
Old leather doesn't really work well with Fruit Loops.
That's true. I love Fruit Loops. All right, guys. Well, thank you all very, very, very much for this installment 1 of this series that we're going to be doing. Really appreciate it. Dark Enlightenment, Mr. Poland, and Mr. Heimbach. What say again?
Are we going to call this Jews Ruin Everything?
I think we'll just call it Jews Ruin Everything. Yeah. What do you think? Jews Ruin Everything.
Hail victory, gentlemen.
Yes, hail victory. All right, thanks, guys. For the Paranormies that couldn't make it, Adam, Scott, Brad, you guys missed a good show. I am Johnny Monoxide, and I'm going to see if I can't find a creepypasta to follow this up. If not, I'll find something religious to tag on the end. We'll see you guys later.
Have you ever heard stories from the Bible and wondered, if our God is so loving and so forgiving, why, throughout history, has he been so vengeful? Why did he wipe out almost all of life on earth with the flood? Why did he plague the ancient Egyptians time and time again? And why does he still, to this day, allow war and suffering on earth? I have. Have you ever wondered why there is a book, the book, that basically tells us how we must live our lives in order to go to heaven when we die? We must abide by 10 commandments or suffer an eternity of pain, but God will also forgive our sins. This book is full of contradictions and stories about how our all-forgiving, all-loving God murders, tortures, and abuses his power. Let me ask you, is this a being you wish to worship? Is this a being whose house you wish to move into for all eternity? Have you ever heard of the Satanic Bible? Do you know the 11 Satanic Commandments? Allow me to enlighten you. Number 10. Do not kill non-human animals unless you are attacked or for your food. Number 6. Do not take that which does not belong to you unless it is a burden to the other person and they cry out to be relieved. Number 5. Do not make sexual advances unless you are given the mating signal. These are just rules in which to live by. And what of Satan himself? Why, in the same Bible that you worship, did he ever harm a living soul? In fact, when he was in the desert with Jesus, he was actually looking out for him, basically saying 40 days and nights without food. You need to eat something or you will die. Jesus was willing to die for his God, and God was willing to let him. Satan has never killed. Satan has never brought harm to anyone. Satan has only ever looked out for people. In the Garden of Eden, both Adam and Eve were left naked for a perverted God to see. They knew nothing other than what God wanted them to, and was asked not to eat from the tree of life. But Satan granted them both knowledge and free will. Their eyes were opened to how cruel their God really is, and for this they were banished. Would an all-forgiving, all-loving God do that? Some people say the devil's greatest trick was convincing the world he didn't exist, but I believe those people are wrong. We were all wrong. I believe that the truth is this. The devil's greatest trick wasn't convincing the world he doesn't exist, but convincing the world that he is God. I believe that somehow the devil overthrew God and banished him from heaven. I believe that after this, he assumed both the role and the name of God and left us to worship him, thinking the real God is actually the devil. I believe this is why God is so vengeful in the Bible. I believe this is why God sends down plagues. I believe this is why God has killed, yet the devil has not. I believe they swapped places, and we just don't know it. And I believe when we pray to our God to join him in heaven, our prayers are answered. But we don't go where we expect.